The room was supposed to belong to Senator Mike Lee. Armed with decades of legal credentials and a reputation as one of the GOP's sharpest constitutional minds, he entered the hearing certain he would dominate. Across the table sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, a younger Democrat with far less tenure, no Ivy League law degree, and none of Lee's institutional gravitas. By every traditional measure, this was a mismatch. But within minutes, the script flipped. In the hearing room, the air was already tense, but Senator Mike Lee tightened the noose around his own credibility without realizing it. For years, his authority had rested on credentials, courtroom polish, and a mastery of constitutional theory, but in this moment he overplayed his hand. First, he dismissed Representative Jasmine Crockett's points as mere emotional appeals, echoing the tired stereotype that passion is weakness and that authority belongs only to men with degrees and decades in ivory towers. Then, he elevated his resume over lived experience, citing books, Senate years, and elite legal circles, credentials that only made him seem detached, like someone who had spent too long in marble hallways and too little time in neighborhoods where laws are survival. Finally, he drove the knife too deep with one sentence: the Constitution isn't a social work manual. It's not therapy. It's law. What he intended as dominance instead painted him as cold, elitist, and out of touch with the very people the Constitution was meant to protect. In doing so, Lee had set a trap for himself, and all Crockett had to do was spring it. Leaning forward, eyes locked on Lee, she began calmly, "Senator, you say the Constitution isn't a social work manual. You say it's not therapy. I agree. But what you forget is this: it's not your personal academic trophy either. It's a living framework for the people who sent us here." With precision, she cut through his resume, reminding the room that constitutional law isn't just theory but lived reality. She pressed harder: "You've studied it, lectured about it, quoted it, but how many hours have you sat with families silenced by suppression laws? How many nights have you fought in courtrooms for people shut out by barriers, not by theory, but by design?" In an instant, Lee's greatest strength, his academic expertise, became his weakness, exposed as sterile beside Crockett's courtroom-honed experience. Then came the knockout line, delivered like a closing argument: "Senator, constitutional law doesn't just live in books. It lives in the lives of the people it protects. And if you can't see that, maybe it's not me who lacks experience." The gallery erupted, not in noise, but in the charged silence of realization. Crockett hadn't just defended herself, she had turned the full weight of Lee's authority back against him. The room was silent, every staffer, journalist, and spectator perched on the edge of their seat. Representative Jasmine Crockett had already cut through Senator Mike Lee's arrogance, but now she aimed higher, reclaiming the Constitution itself. She drew a breath and spoke with deliberate weight: "Senator Lee, you treat the Constitution like it begins with you. But it doesn't. It begins with we the people." The words landed like thunder. Cameras zoomed in, pens froze above notepads, and everyone knew this wasn't just a rebuttal, it was history being written. Crockett pressed on, steady and unshaken: "We the people didn't write this document to serve elites in Washington. We wrote it to guarantee that every American, rich or poor, black or white, educated or not, would have a voice. And yet, here we are, with laws and loopholes designed to keep people silent. That's not constitutionalism. That's manipulation." Her gaze locked on Lee, her tone sharp as steel: "You say the Constitution isn't therapy. You're right. It's not supposed to comfort the powerful. It's supposed to protect the powerless. That's the difference between how you read it and how I live it." For the first time, the senator had no reply. His smirk was gone, replaced by a tight jaw and the faintest flicker of panic. He gripped the table, his once polished delivery collapsing into stammered fragments. "Representative, that's not, the Constitution clearly states," but the words were jagged, weak, and unconvincing. On one side of the room, Democrats exchanged stunned, almost giddy glances. On the other, Republicans sat rigid, their star quarterback fumbling under the lights. The chair tried to move things along, but Lee lunged forward, clinging to scraps of authority. "I never said only lawyers could understand the Constitution. I only meant," Crockett sliced through his excuse, "Senator, the only thing your interpretation of the Constitution has accomplished is stripping Americans of their rights while you publish articles explaining why that's good for democracy. That's not expertise. That's malpractice." The words struck harder than any gavel. Cameras zoomed in on Lee's face, flushed, trembling, drained of confidence. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Nothing. Absolute silence. For a man who built his brand on never being bested in debate, it was over. Mike Lee wasn't just defeated, he was dismantled, not by another senator or law professor, but by a younger representative who had the courage to say what millions had been thinking for years. The silence that followed was deafening, not a pause but the sound of a career breaking. The moment the gavel struck for recess, the political earthquake began. Staffers sprinted into hallways with buzzing phones, and within minutes, clips of Jasmine Crockett's dismantling of Senator Mike Lee flooded social media. The first viral video, a tight 90 seconds of Crockett's most devastating lines against Lee's stunned silence, hit Twitter before Lee even stood up, and #Crockett shuts down Lee was trending nationwide in 15 minutes. The reactions were merciless. That wasn't a debate. That was a constitutional demolition. You could see the exact second his career snapped in half. TikTok edits, Instagram reels, and memes flooded timelines, branding Lee the Senate's constitutional pit bull muzzled by a freshman. Analysts weighed in too. A Georgetown professor declared it historic, while a veteran journalist called it a generational shift. By sundown, Crockett was a household name, and Lee, a cautionary tale. But Lee had always lived by one political rule: fight back harder. An hour later, his Senate account tweeted, Representative Crockett's performance demonstrated why constitutional expertise matters. Emotional appeals don't change legal precedent. It backfired instantly. The replies shredded him. Maybe it's time to listen instead of lecture. You mean the Constitution that starts with "we the people"? Crockett already covered this. Memes mocked him with captions like "Professor versus practitioner and "we the people Harvard Law". Desperate, Lee tried damage control with a friendly conservative talk show. The host gently pressed, Senator, critics say your expertise feels disconnected from real Americans, how do you respond? Lee forced a smile. Constitutional law isn't a popularity contest. Passion doesn't change principles. But the delivery was hollow, defensive, stripped of the authority he once commanded. Clips of the interview spread online, not as a defense but as confirmation. Mike Lee wasn't just defeated, he was broken. And while he stumbled, Jasmine Crockett's star only burned brighter. By the next morning, it was clear this wasn't just a headline, it was a turning point. Jasmine Crockett's dismantling of Senator Mike Lee reverberated far beyond a single committee hearing, shaking the foundations of political combat itself. For decades, senior legislators like Lee had wielded credentials, degrees, clerkships, decades of service, as weapons to silence younger lawmakers. But Crockett flipped the script. She transformed Lee's constitutional expertise from a source of authority into evidence of his disconnection from real Americans. Analysts quickly recognized the moment for what it was, a collapse of the old hierarchy. A veteran reporter declared, this wasn't just a debate. It was the collapse of an old order. Credentials no longer equal dominance. Political scientists agreed, framing Crockett's performance as a generational shift, where real-world impact now outweighed academic accolades. Progressive groups seized on the energy, calling it the new playbook, and within days younger lawmakers across the country were echoing her strategy in hearings of their own. The shockwaves didn't stop there. Crockett's fundraising skyrocketed, with small donors flooding her campaign and leaving notes like, this is what real representation looks like. Her haul in 1 week outpaced what many incumbents managed in an entire quarter. Democratic strategists studied her performance like a masterclass, building training programs for younger candidates around her model. Don't be intimidated, weaponize your opponent's credentials, and fight from lived experience. Establishment Democrats, once wary of progressives, admitted they were impressed. One senior senator confessed privately, she didn't just defend her position. She reframed the entire debate. That's historic. Meanwhile, Mike Lee's downfall was swift and humiliating. His publisher delayed his new book on constitutional interpretation, worried it would be mocked rather than taken seriously. Invitations from think tanks and universities evaporated. On the Senate floor, colleagues who once deferred to him now openly challenged his interpretations, his aura of untouchability gone. Conservative strategists panicked. Lee was supposed to be our firewall, one admitted off the record. If he can't hold his ground, The old tactics aren't working anymore. We need a new playbook, fast. Asterisk. What had begun as a 5-minute exchange was now reshaping careers, campaigns, and party strategies. For Lee, it marked the collapse of a reputation built over decades. For Crockett, it was the beginning of something larger, a generational shift where power flowed not from resumes, but from results, and where we the people had found a new champion. What Jasmine Crockett did to Mike Lee didn't just live inside the walls of Congress, it spilled into the bloodstream of American culture. Clips of her takedown ricocheted across platforms, not only on political Twitter but on TikTok, Instagram, and even as remixed viral audios. Teenagers who never paid attention to hearings were quoting her words. Asterisk, the Constitution wasn't written for senators with fancy degrees, it was written for we the people. Asterisk, late-night comedians replayed Lee's speechless moment with captions like asterisk loading. Please wait, asterisk, or laid the Windows error chime over his silence. Even entertainment outlets, usually apolitical, framed Crockett as something rare in Washington, authentic, unshaken, and real. Law schools turned her testimony into a case study. Professors highlighted her rhetorical judo, flipping Lee's strengths into weaknesses, her use of cadence and silence as weapons, and her reframing of expertise from abstract theory to lived experience. But beyond classrooms, the exchange resonated on a deeply personal level. For workers condescended to by bosses, students dismissed by teachers, or activists told they lacked experience, Crockett's dismantling of Lee was vindication. It was cultural justice. Signs appeared at protests, asterisk, we the people fancy degrees. Asterisk, social media summed it up, asterisk, she didn't just debate him. She spoke for all of us who've been talked down to. Asterisk. By the time the dust settled, her takedown was no longer a viral clip, it was a turning point. Strategists whispered about the Crockett Doctrine, a new blueprint for challenging entrenched power. Don't fight on the old guard's terms. Redefine expertise itself, not what you know in theory, but what you've done for people in practice. Younger lawmakers quickly adopted the strategy, weaving Crockett's words into speeches and campaign ads, while grassroots activists quoted her lines at rallies and town halls. The cultural hierarchy of authority, where degrees and titles demanded deference, was crumbling. For Mike Lee, the legacy was brutal. He kept his Senate seat, but never again his aura of invincibility. Every time he invoked his credentials, someone would throw his silence back at him with 2 words, asterisk, we the people. Asterisk, his dominance was broken forever. For Jasmine Crockett, it was the beginning of something larger. She became a symbol of generational change, embodying a new kind of leadership that wielded authenticity, clarity, and courage as sharper weapons than resumes or ivory tower prestige. What unfolded in that hearing room wasn't just a clash, it was a transfer of power. The old era of deference to credentials had ended. The age of accountability to the people had begun.